Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister with responsibility for Indigenous Affairs, Alan Tudge. And Mr Tudge, thanks for your time. Your thoughts on Mick Gooder's contribution and his reaction to the Prime Minister's comments?
Well, Mick Gooder is partially correct that you need to have a basic education, basic capacity to exercise choice, and that's part of the reasons for the Western Australian government making the decisions that it has, is that you can't build a school for a single family. You can only build a viable school where there's a critical mass of people. Now, my overall view is that each family, each individual has a right to live wherever they like, but governments have to make choices also about where to invest their money. And it's very difficult to invest money into very, very remote locations where there may only be one or two families. You simply can't build a viable school, and you simply can't get reasonable jobs in those locations.
What do you say to Mick Gooder's suggestion that lifestyle choices, as the Prime Minister put it, that these impoverished people in many respects don't have the luxury of such choices?
Well, the reason why they may not have a reasonable choice is because they don't have a good education. Now, that's our absolute top priority and #1 focus, is at least getting kids to school and getting a decent education, because with an education becomes opportunities and gives you choices. Now, part of the problem with the very, very remote locations is that it's almost impossible to give the kids a very good education. As I said before, you can't build a school for a single family. And in fact, even if you've got all the money in the world, it's still very difficult to give a good education to one or two individual families in a very, very remote location. And hence the reasons for wanting to focus more of the resources at some of the larger towns, so that kids can go to school and so that there are more opportunities for the adults to get real jobs.
Yeah, and that all makes sense, absolutely. But when you're talking about individuals who have links to the land, ancient links over tens of thousands of years, is that something that the Prime Minister should have made reference to, should have paid respect to in those particular comments? That's certainly the take of a number of Indigenous leaders in their reaction to the comments.
Kieran, connection to land is very important for many Aboriginal people, but a good education and good health is also very important. Now, as you know, Kieran, before I was a Member of Parliament, I worked with Noel Pearson, and his view was that we need to encourage orbiting, where people maintain their connection to land but are willing to orbit in and out, if you like, to Brisbane, to Melbourne, to Sydney. In fact, one of his favourite sayings was from Cape York to New York, because that's the culture and capacity that he wanted to develop in his Aboriginal people up in Cape York. The ability to make choices to go from Cape York, take opportunities in New York should they choose, while still maintaining that connection to their land. I think that's the vision that we should have, so that each individual, each family can have those real opportunities and real choices to exercise and take the opportunities which are available for everybody else.
That certainly makes a lot of sense, absolutely, and I guess there are many Australians who would think that the Prime Minister's comments make a lot of sense as well, in saying that if you want to close the gap, you've got to get the kids to school, you've got the adults to get the adults to work. I guess the question that's being asked is, should the PM have sat down with the communities in the first instance, as opposed to floating this through media interviews?
Oh, well, Kieran, I think he was responding to some decisions which the Western Australian government has made in relation to the very small communities. So he was being frank, he was being upfront, and in some respects, I think saying some common sense. The only point that I'd make, Kieran, is I was actually bitterly disappointed with Labor's response to this, in part because they made similar decisions when they were in government. They made the decision, for example, to no longer invest in public housing in what's called the homelands communities, which are they very small communities, well removed from even the remote settlements. Now, if it was good enough for Labor to make that decision then, why isn't it the right decision now?
Okay, so from here, I know this is an area that you know well, as you said earlier. You worked with Noel Pearson, who is a great leader, Indigenous leader, and has made such a wonderful contribution. Where to from here, though, to make this viable to close the gap with respect to, but maintaining respect to the ancient links to the land that our First Peoples have?
Kieran, as you know, our key focus is to ensure that kids are at school and adults are at working and that communities are safe, because when you've got those three ingredients, then people have capacity to make decisions and to take advantage of all of the opportunities which are available to
But it's
you
very
and me
sensitive, isn't it?
and
It's
other
very sensitive
Australians.
to the links, their links to the land, as you know, and you know this very well, better than most. That's such a sensitive area. How do you manage that?
Listen, as I said before, connection to land is very important for many people. But at the same time, it's hard to maintain a strong culture if people aren't educated. And so I support this view, or Noel Pearson's view of orbiting, of people being connected to their land, but also orbiting for work and then coming back, or orbiting for education and then coming back to their land. In many cases, I think that's the only viable, strong option for people to both be educated and have that connection to land.
Alan Tudge, I appreciate your time and your reaction to that. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Kieran.
And that's all for AM Agenda this morning. Thank you for your company. Sportsline next with